Has anyone ever made a weapon that wasn't used? The network's been built. It's up. It grows or it dies. We've waited long enough.
You realize what you've set in motion?
It was time for that as well.
Palpatine won't hesitate now.
Exactly. We need it. We need the fear. We need them to overreact.
You can't be serious.
The Empire has been choking us so slowly we're starting not to notice. The time has come to force their hand.
People will suffer.
That's the plan.
Greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to the 178th Cassian choking episode of Mandovision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. We are so glad you're here. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is, of course, on social media. We are at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and follow this show with all the Mandalorians that are in your covert. How is everyone doing? It has happened once again. A new episode of Andor has dropped, and we are here to talk about it first thing in the morning. Well, maybe not first thing in the morning, but in the morning after we've watched and pondered and thought deeply on what we just witnessed. We're here to discuss the new episode of Andor, and let me tell you, I was absolutely delighted with this episode. Again, there's sort of not concern is not the wrong word. Sorry, concern is the wrong word. But again, after a big episode like last week's, the big heist comes to the fore, and we spend a lot of time getting into that, diving into that, focusing on that very singular experience. I mean, 99% of that episode was about the heist and everything going on with it, going wrong with it, and sort of the immediate aftermath of it, skiing, trying to rip everybody off. Focus on it with a singular vision. And then we roll into this episode, and it's sort of be like, what's the fallout going to be? Obviously, we're going to take a breath. We're not going to be in another wall-to-wall action-based episode of the show. At least that was sort of my thought going into it, and that was right. But what we got in the episode titled Announcement was pretty thought-provoking in sort of the response that all the characters have to the heist on Aldhani. Aldhani Heist has just changed the game. As Luthen tells us, it's an announcement. It's sort of a proclamation. The rebellion has begun. And all of our principal characters, from Cyril Karn to Deidre Merrow to Andian, Cassian Andor, Mon Mothma, all of them. And this is an episode where this really strong ensemble cast that we have, we get to sort of see their perspectives on things and sort of process things in a very different way as they are processing and going through their things that they're going through. They really get a chance to kind of come out and get a little bit of the spotlight in this episode. And not that casting doesn't have a lot to do in it, particularly in the back half of the show, but everyone gets a good chunk of time to react and process what's happened on Aldhani right now. And it's a really smartly written episode, which, again, we haven't gone into the particulars just yet, but I want to give kind of special credit to The writer of this episode is Stephen Schiff, and I assume he's going to be the principal writer for this next probably 3-episode arc of the show. And when I saw his name flash across the credits, I sort of did like a double take. I was like, wait, I know that name. Why do I know that name? So I went onto the internet and did my Googling. And yes, indeed, he is a writer from one of my favorite television shows of recent times, and that would be The Americans, a show that I loved on FX more than anything. I was all into that show. That was a show that had an amazing level of detail and spycraft work into it. And this is really like one of the biggest episodes of Andor so far, where we're seeing that spycraft come into play here. You know, with signals for meetups and dead drops and all these other things that you want to see in a spycraft kind of show. We're getting those elements in this episode, and it's so delightful. So I don't want to spend too much time gushing about Stephen Schiff's writing abilities, but just know that you're in capable hands for a guy who's going to deliver you some really stellar spycraft stuff, and the fact that he worked so prominently on a show like The Americans that was set in the in the early to mid 80s, when technology was very different. I think it's very appropriate. He sort of already has an appropriate skill set level, because again, the rebellion is going to be doing things in a very DIY fashion. It's going to be low tech. It's going to be like these things, like we said, like secret meetups and sigils on walls, sigils on the ground, dead drop locations. Very classic spycraft stuff, and I'm here for it. I can't wait. I want more. Gimme more. But we're going to talk about all these things that happened in the episode. We're going to kind of go back to what we did in our episode 5 breakdown. We're going to kind of focus on each character, our principal characters, if you will. And actually, we had a chance to highlight some of the lesser known characters at this point in the series too, which will be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to it. Let's get into it right now. What do you say? So our particulars for this week's episode, Andor Episode 7, Announcement. Original air date today, October 19th, 2022. Written by Stephen Schiff of The Americans. Directed by Benjamin Caron, I believe is how you say that. Our plot for this week's episode. The fallout from the Aldhani Heist is swift and seismic, shaking the Imperial Security Bureau on Coruscant into action and prompting more intrigue for Senator Mon Mothma. Meanwhile, Cassian Andor returns home to find a much-changed Ferrix. Our principal cast this week, once again, Diego Luna as Cassian Andor. We got Stellan Skarsgård. We got Genevieve O'Reilly, and a wonderful cast of characters around them. Because this cast is such an ensemble, I really got to start writing down everybody's names. But we get to see more from Elizabeth Dulau in this episode, which is really nice. She has some fun things to do here, as we get to see a little bit more of Keela in play, and one of many great characters in this ensemble cast. So just enjoy everyone's performances. They're so good. All right, we'll be back. Jeez Louise. You know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
The following measures will be adopted empire-wide as of today. A tribute tax equal to 5 times the amount stolen from Aldhani will be levied on any sector harboring partisan activity.
We will make it clear that no one steals from the Empire.
The use of any local custom, festival, or tradition as cover for rebel activity will trigger permanent revocation of Imperial tolerance. I spoke with Emperor Palpatine last night, and he's assured me that the ISB will be taking the lead going forward. No one in this room should have trouble accessing army or naval resources in future. The Emperor will be convening an emergency session of the Senate to propose a legislation package of bills and amendments that will free our hands in all matters of surveillance, search, and seizure.
We will be invoking the Public Order Resentencing Directive later today. PORD.
Any criminal act with even indirect effect on the Empire will henceforth be branded a Class 1 offense.
All prison sentences are immediately re-evaluated. All outstanding fines and levies are to be paid in full.
So there you're hearing it straight from the horse's mouth. One of the higher uppity-ups at the ISB, who I've been trying to track down this character's name. I really was curious because if you've been listening to the show for any amount of time, as we've covered Andor, I really would love them to bring in the leader, the commander in charge of the ISB from the old expanded universe books, the Isard. That would be phenomenal. So I'm trying to find out if that's who that character is. But thus far, I have been unsuccessful in my endeavors to do so. But we are hearing from this character, who has spoken directly to Emperor Palpatine, that the ISB is now being granted a bevy of wide-sweeping powers: search and seizure, surveillance, all these things. And again, now they now have access to cross imperial databases and information and resources from the Army to the Navy and all across the boards, as well as new criminal proceedings and sentencing structures as well. Everything that he's talking about in this monologue, if you want to call it that, comes into play in this episode, particularly at the very end with the new stricter sentencing as Andor gets himself into a world of trouble that he has basically caused himself by being a member of the heist on Aldhani. So everything that has just been laid out, we see executed, but maybe not in the ways that we think they're going to be, in particular, because they've just given ISB agent Deidre Marrow sort of the access that she needs to sort of prove her theory that she's been working on for the previous episodes of the series, that rebel activity is not independent and isolated. It's all connected. And she's going to be able to prove that very, very soon in this episode. The episode opens with our good friend Syl Karn, once again being chastised by his mother for altering his clothes. And this is something we've seen him do in the first episode when we first introduced to him, when he's on when he's one of the corpos on Morlana 1. You know, he took it upon himself to tailor his suit. And there's a really interesting bit of dialogue with his mother here about that, about how doing that is a move. It's a calculated move to draw attention to yourself. In this Imperial world that's very much about blending in and being one of like the faceless, nameless drones that just goes about their business and does the business of the Empire without being an individual. It's sort of I don't know. It has a very what writer do I want to pick for this reference? I guess we'll go with like Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky, my goodness, sort of criticizing that, again, that sort of society that is not about individual achievement, and there's a very good comparison there to the Empire. Again, you are simply a cog in the machine. You are one of many that makes the machine of the Empire go forward, and again, Karn is chastised for his efforts to try and stand out. And it's interesting because he is such a believer in the Imperial authority and doing the things that he's been raised to do by the book and in support of his empire. But this sort of quest for individuality to sort of stand out amongst the drones and to sort of yearn for a station higher than himself is very, very interesting. And so I sort of wonder what will happen when he has the chance to kind of come into contact with either Agent Deidre Marrow or even, once again, with Cassian Andor. How will his quest for self-identity and basically, trying to elevate himself, either what path will that put him on going forward? I'm really waiting to see how that shakes out for him now that we're into this third arc of the first season here. So I'm very, very intrigued by it. Throughout this, later on in this episode, we do see, again, we go right into the bureaucratic hive, the bureaucratic beehive of the Empire, as his Uncle Harlow has pulled these strings to get him that position that was talked about a few episodes ago. And it's very drone-like. It is the Star Wars equivalent of office cubicles, and you're just data pushing. You're just, again, a cog in the machine. You're pushing buttons, you're checking numbers, and it looks like the absolute height of tedium, of boredom, of just, I want to sit in this cubicle and slit my wrists as soon as humanly possible, but they've taken all sharp objects away from me because I must process the data. It just looks like a miserable existence. And again, Karn seems to have a loftier opinion of himself, that he is worthy of more opportunity, more advancement. He sort of wants to be, if you know, again, he wants to be a cog in the machine, but he wants to be his own cog in the machine, not one of many. So it's very, very interesting, and I want to know if his perspective on things will change throughout this experience. But his uncle Harlow has pulled the strings. We don't know much about this Harlow, but he's obviously he's got some pull, whether he's in the Imperial Navy, higher up in the Senate, in Palpatine's inner circle. Who is to say at this point? But very, very interesting. And so Karn plugs himself in to the faceless drone-led beehive of Imperial bureaucracy, and it just looks dreadful to me. So very, very dreadful. Now I want to shift our focus to ISB agent operative officer. I think that might be the better word for Deidre Marrow, because I don't know what it is about this character, but I really find this part of season 1 story to be really fascinating. I sort of love this look inside the Empire, and the ISB I think is a wonderful place to kind of do it, because it sort of has these KGB SS kind of vibes to it in a sense, but there's all this like office politics going on. There's you know the corporate ladder climbing that we've seen in previous episodes, the way she's squared off against Blevins in the past. All these elements are really going to come to the fore in this episode in a really wonderful way. And you know, the reason, I know it was a big chunk of time for the episode, but one of the reasons why we played that entire thing with the commander of the ISB laying out the groundwork for all these new powers that the ISB has is because Marrow is the one who uses them to her benefit. You know, as we sort of addressed early in the episode, you know, she uses this new all-powerful executive order to requisition all the data that she needs from every system in the galaxy when it pertains to the theft of Imperial hardware, weapons, technology, all these things. And she's the one who's able to sort of realize that this is an organized attack against the Empire. And I'm really digging this storyline. And then Blevins tries to call her out for it, and he gets slapped down by her. And it's Major Partagaz supports her on this because she's showing initiative. She is kind of taking the bull by the horns. And so Blevins gets the Ferrex system stripped from him. He's no longer overseeing it because Marrow has shown that something's going on and Ferrex is part of it, and I need to be involved with Ferrex. So now it gets reassigned to her. And again, I'm jumping ahead in the episode, but I'm trying to focus on the character stuff in this episode. So let's go back to the very beginning when we're first hanging out with Marrow, and all these new executive orders, these new powers for the ISB are being laid out, and as far and not just for the ISB, but the sort of wide sweeping galactic changes that are being levied in response to the heist on Aldhani. All right, Aldhani Heist happens, and the Empire's coming after systems that harbor partisans that use. There will be repercussions for cultural expressions and celebrations and festivals if they're used as part of a con, a scam, a heist against the Empire. There will be punishments on these people. Again, all these things that we know about the Empire they're not being subtle anymore. And I think that's what Luthen Rael wanted. And it's Deidre Marrow who sees that. So let's go ahead and play this exchange right after the meeting that announces all these wide sweeping changes. Check it out.
You're not pleased.
We're playing straight into their hands.
Whose hands?
The rebels. This is exactly what they want. We're treating what happened at Aldhani like a robbery.
What would you call it?
An announcement.
Boom. There it is. So yeah, she gets it. She's seen the bigger picture here, that there's a lot more going on. And again, the parts with this character, there's just something about it I find completely fascinating. and whether it's the weird bureaucracy in play, the office politics of the whole situation. Because again, she slaps down Blevins' claims against her. Major Partagaz supports her, and then he warns her to watch her back because Blevins will now be after her, and there may be other ISB officers in that room coming after her now too, because they're seeing that now she's started to gain some favor. She's getting some traction. She's moving up the food chain, and that will upset many of them. There was a great reference to, again, I don't know the name of the officer. I don't know if they've given this officer a name, but he's in charge of the sector that contains Ord Mantell. And I thought that was a very interesting that he was sort of illuminating that he's having some real troubles in Ord Mantell. Now, again, the timelines may not gel 1,000% just yet, but who do we know has been operating out of Ord Mantell in the time between Episode 3 and Episode 4? The Bad Batch. Maybe there's a connection. Maybe there's not. But Ord Mantell, there's a lot going on at Ord Mantell. It's a crazy place. And maybe the Bad Batch is involved. Maybe it's not. But it's kind of fun to pretend that maybe the Bad Batch has given this ISB officer a headache. That's kind of fun for me to think about. So I like to get a nice Ord Mantell reference in this episode as well. Now let's kind of shift back because our next sequence is what we open the show with. It's Mon Mothma arriving at Luthen Rael's shop, returning one of the artifacts that she procured from him earlier in the season. And it's all pretense for having a meeting with Luthen because Mon Mothma wants to know if he was behind the Aldhani heist, and yeah, they have a very strong conversation about it, and basically he tells her, he's like, you knew this was coming, it's time to it's time for action, I guess is the nicest way I could put it. There's some other expressions I could put in there, but it's time to make things happen. And Luthen talks about it. He mentions it. She's freaking out. She's upset because Palpatine's reacting. The Empire's reacting. And they're going to levy these things against the people, and people will suffer. And she doesn't want to see that suffering. But Luthen knows that he says it in that line of dialogue, that the Empire's been choking us so slowly that we don't even notice anymore. And now the Empire's going to start choking you a lot harder and for a lot longer. And people are going to notice. And people are going to push back. Like, this is going to you're going to start to see the groundswell of opposition. People will start to rise up. There will be unrest across the galaxy on different planets, on different fronts, because of imperial policies that will come to pass. Because there will now be conflict. There will now be an opposition. And the Empire is going to try and snuff that out as best they can, and they're going to make the people suffer in order to do so. It's a classic tactic. We've seen it in a million stories, a million movies, a million different things. Like, this is the response of the overarching villainous regime is to make the people suffer. But by making the people suffer, you inspire them to rebel. And Luthen knows that, and that's his whole plan. And Mon Mothma may not agree, but action had to be taken. Now was the time. It's been what, 15 years? The time for action was now. He says that the network is built. It either grows or it dies. It's time for this rebellion to get some legs under it. And it sort of sounds like, in a sense, like Luthen may have been the one to sort of start the fire here with the Aldhani heist, and kind of bringing those elements together to get this heist, to get this payroll, to fund the rebellion. But I think he very much sees it as something that has to learn how to sustain itself. I think he knows that his time with it will be limited, that he may be caught and exposed at some point, and he may die being caught and exposed, or he may die in another way in his fight against the Empire. And I'm really intrigued to get to see what Luthen's story is. Like, why does he feel this way? What are his motivations? What made him choose this course of action? I really want to get into his backstory. I really want to see what it is. And I'd love for it to be something just unexpected. Not necessarily a character who is swept up in necessarily in like a family tragedy and loss of loved ones. Because that's a great motivator, but we've seen it before. I'd like to see something a little bit different with Luthen's actions, I suppose. I want to see his origin story be maybe tweaked a little bit different than the conventional. My loved ones have been taken from me by the Empire. I think there could be a new fun way to do that and kind of show him as a different a different kind of radical, I suppose, if you will. and I'm very intrigued by it. We also get from this. We also get from Mon Mothma's section of the episode. We get to see Mon Mothma living that elitist lifestyle, living with the upper crust and the 1%. And she's got this fancy dinner party going on at her house. It's a whole hullabaloo, hubbub, soiree, whatever you want to call it. It's fancy. It's fancy, and I wasn't invited because I don't have clothes that nice, and that's okay. We see Mon meeting up with a childhood friend of hers from Chandrila, a man by the name of Take Homa, who we find out is a banker. And this is the person she alluded to several episodes ago that she wanted to kind of bring into the fold because she's being watched. Her driver is an ISB plant. All of her communications are being watched. Her husband might even be spying on her. That's sort of what I got from this party because Perrin is around schmoozing with other people, but he's always sort of got an eye out. Like, where's Mon? Who's Mon talking to? What's Mon doing right now? So, and she says it, Perrin's not to be trusted. Now, she may be referring directly to the information that she relays to Take Homa, but I think there may be more to it than that. I think Perrin may be out to expose her. he wants to watch her and rat her out if she does anything anti-Empire. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into some of the looks he was casting about the room, but that was sort of the vibe I got. But yeah, so Take Homa is the individual that Mon Mothma had discussed to Luthen Rael about bringing into the fold to help sort of loosen the restrictions on her purse strings of getting some funding for this rebellion. You know, Mon's been trying to move money around from her personal fortune to help the rebellion, but she's being watched. All eyes are on her. So she wants to bring Take Homa into the fold to help set up one of Mon's many charitable organizations where they think she's just trying to be a do-gooder and support. I think she calls them. I think she said something along the lines of people see her as someone who supports separatist do-gooders, and so like she's just kind of quickly written off for not embracing the just the greed that the Empire has bestowed upon the already wealthy. She seems to be the one kind of ruffling the feathers a little bit, but that's why they're watching her, because they're worried that she hasn't bought all in. And I like that she takes Tay into her confidence to an extent and says, tells him that this is a facade. There's more going on here than you know. But let's not get into specifics here. I just need your help with this organization I'm putting together. We're going to do some charity work. I need you to move some money around. That's going to be simple as that. But can Take Homa be trusted, right? He expresses that he has political tastes that may not be to Mon's liking. He sort of paints himself as a bit of an extremist, a bit of an anti-Empire guy. But again, we seem to be shifting into the spycraft element of the story, where Mon Mothma, a character who, rightfully so, is probably very paranoid about who she can talk to and who she can be herself around. So who are the betrayers? Who are the ones who will inform on her? Who are the collaborators? This is where we're going to get into some real... I think we're going to get some really good spycrafty stuff, and I can't wait to see how it all kind of shakes out some more. But she takes a big risk bringing Tay into this picture. Luthen's warned her against it, but she wants to help fund this. She wants to subvert the Empire and its policies and its plans, and she's trying to do it in her way. Luthen is a bit more overt. He's a bit more... I think he has a bit more in line with Saw Gerrera type people, right? And as we know, Saw Gerrera will be on the show. So I think he falls more into that man of action category, or person of action category, as opposed to Mon, who is still trying to use what she considers to be the proper channels and the proper methodology, while still funding an uprising of some sort. But I think in Mon's mind, it'll be more of a political upheaval than a armed revolution, and I think we'll get a chance to dive into that some more. So some interesting stuff in that conversation, and again, very telling that she tells Take-Homa not to trust Perrin. So we'll see how this kind of shakes out with them. But you get a little bit more of a peek into Mon's life, her relationship with her husband, which is even worse than maybe I thought it was when we first started the show. Her daughter shows up, and again, not quite sure what role the daughter will play moving forward here. She seems to be just a bit of a unhappy teen at this point, but again, I think there may be some more to that. We'll see how that all kind of shakes out. And since we were talking about Mon and Luthen, they kind of go hand in hand at this point. We'll also mention, again, more spycraft stuff here because from this great ensemble cast, we get to see Keela Merricky, Luthen's concierge at the antiques shop. She gets to kind of step out here a little bit and make her way through Coruscant. Again, employing elements of spycraft, carefully concealed markings on the ground for directions, for a secret meeting with Vel, who has sort of collected herself after the Aldhani Heist, and is now making contact. And I'm going to go ahead and play a bit of that conversation here because some very interesting information comes out, is shared, is expressed, and it's things that we got to talk about. So let's go ahead and check that out right now.
Where is he?
I shouldn't even be here. Neither of us should.
The money's safe.
We know. It's been moved already. You've done exceptional work. It's the trawler we're more worried about.
It's buried, gone for good.
You're sure?
Yes.
He read your message.
I really thought he'd be here.
Every loss is different. Everyone's the same. I recruited Taramyn myself. Nemik, go on, they'll all be remembered.
That's it.
He had doubts about schemes, one less thing to worry about.
Have you heard from Cinta?
She's doing what she was told. Now, receiving messages is just as dangerous as sending them. You should keep that in mind. We have a loose end. Cassian Andor, who you know as Clem. You need to find him.
Find him?
We can't have him walking around with Luthen in his head.
You mean kill him?
This is what revolution looks like, Val. We'll send you what we have on him.
So we see Clea in a very different light in this episode after this conversation with Vel, and much more authoritative than we've seen her in the minimal screen time that she's had thus far. But apparently, she has serious pull with Luthen and getting this rebellion off the ground. She's not just his assistant. She seems to be calling just as many shots as he is. And I think the question that we take away from this, at least the question I have to wonder, because again, I wonder if she's operating independently from Luthen with instructions to kill Cassian, or if this is in fact from Luthen as well. Like Luthen knows, like Cassian Andor's out there now. He was bought and paid for, but he's a loose end. He could expose everything. Let's get rid of him. So I want to know if she's acting on her own, or if this is with Luthen's blessing, because it does seem interesting to me that Luthen would want Andor killed after the big recruiting push that he gave him. It seems to me that these two need to have another conversation about everything and kind of get on the same page here. So yeah, I'm curious if Clea's acting on her own, or if this is straight like Luthen's blessing is all over this. I'm very curious how this is all shaping up, or if Clea is just sort of like in charge of security, so she's like, well, this guy's out here running around, it was all about Luthen, so he's got to go. So now we find ourselves in a very interesting position for Cassian, as we're about to talk about his part of the story here, because Cassian's still wanted by the Empire, but now he's wanted by the Rebellion too. So he's about to find himself in quite the pickle. I want to go back, since we brought up Luthen once again, to the conversation that he and Mon are having in the antique shop at the beginning of the episode. Again, I thought it was another really exceptionally done scene between Genevieve O'Reilly and our team here. I'm sorry, Genevieve O'Reilly and Stellan Skarsgård, and I like the way that they sort of are choosing their words in a very cautious manner, just in case this ISB guy can hear anything outside. The ISB driver that she has, the sort of play acting going on with Luthen's gesticulations, his wild kind of flamboyant motions. You know, the way he sort of carries himself as the purveyor of these antiquities. But meanwhile, they're talking about very serious things. I thought that was an exceptionally well done scene, and I enjoyed it immensely. A really good sequence here. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Cassie now in that pickle that he's in. And yeah, I mean, let's just talk about it. Okay, so Cassian's returning to Ferrix. He learns that he's been blamed for the Imperial presence now on the planet. Bix wants nothing to do with him, and more surprisingly, Marva, his adopted mother, is now inspired by the heist to join the rebellion, and she sort of rebuffs his efforts to try and get her and B2 Emo to leave, for all of them to leave together now. He's got this score that she doesn't ask questions about, and he doesn't offer any insight to his role in the heist at Aldhani. But we find out that Marva has become inspired by the actions of these rebels against the Empire, and now she wants to be a part of it. And you know, we kind of fasten this in around Cassian having flashbacks to when his adopted father Clem is killed by the Empire. You know, shot, possibly wounded at one point, and then hung in the town square on Ferrix. And we see that, and Clem didn't do anything. Clem was trying to be the peacemaker there. He's trying to get the citizens of Ferrix to not throw rocks and stones and mud at the Imperial troopers as they walk through the town square. But guilty by association is sort of how the Empire viewed it, and so we see shots of Cassian as a child, or as a younger person at the very least, seeing his adopted father's frozen body hanging in the square. And attempting to recklessly charge a group of stormtroopers, who obviously don't kill him, but I'm sure they beat him and humiliate him pretty badly. And then perhaps that's when he gets sent to one of those prison camps he refers to, a couple of episodes ago. There would definitely be consequences of trying to assault a group of stormtroopers at a certain point. But what I think is most interesting, again, this episode had a pretty quick turnaround from our previous episode. So there hasn't been a lot of time elapsed since the heist and sort of the fallout. Like, it's all kind of happening very, very quickly. So Cassian is not. He hasn't really been affected by the people that he lost around him. He hasn't read Nemec's manifesto. He hasn't necessarily softened his own belief in his own prioritizing of his self-interests and his self-preservation for the greater good of something bigger than himself. Although those kind of platitudes that Luthen was talking to him about in the first episode, he hasn't bought in. He's not in all yet. Not in all yet. I should put more spaces in between the words. And again, he hasn't read Nemec's manifesto. He's not thinking in those terms right now. He's trying to go back to his old life. He's trying to. He thinks he's got this money now, and he has access to a ship, and then that he now has freedom. And what we're going to find out, and what he learns by the end of this episode, there is no freedom in the galaxy right now. With the Empire in existence, its boot is felt everywhere. You know, after reluctantly leaving of Ferrix, after Marva says that she won't go with him, that B2 Emo won't go with him, that they're staying and they're going to try to organize rebellion, I would presume on Ferrix. He leaves and he goes on, makes himself heads to a nice cozy looking beachside resort on the planet Niamo, which hey, I like seeing new planets. It's exciting, and it seemed like it was interesting to see like a Star Wars beach resort planet. Like you hear about them in the books or the comics or whatever, but actually getting to see one on the screen was kind of fun, and it was kind of cool because it had sort of like a I don't know, kind of like a Walesy vibe to it. You know, like you ever seen those beaches in Wales? Kind of look like those. You know, something like that. At least to me, in my mind. I don't know. It had a very English beach feel to it in my in my estimation. And we see, he's trying to live this life. He has a new alias, and he's just trying to go about his business. He describes himself as a tourist, but things are happening on this planet. Like the disaffected are trying to live their lives. The people who don't, the haves and the have-nots, right? He's trying to live as a have now, but the have-nots are still doing have-not things. They're robbing, they're stealing, they're trying to live under the watch of the Empire. And a gaggle of young people look like they maybe have stolen some stuff from the Empire. The Empire pursues. Cassian tries to stay out of it, but Cassian doesn't really carry himself as a have. He doesn't look like the beach resort kind of person. And again, he sort of gets profiled for that. And the stormtrooper asking him, is like, well, why are you sweating? Were you running? He's like, no, it's hot. And the stormtrooper's got no time for it. Just labels this guy a malcontent. He's with these people, clearly, because he's sweating on a hot summer day at the beach resort. And he gets lumped in with them and gets choked out by an SO droid. Very, very familiar, wonderful scene of reintroducing the SO droids as you see one bounding up the stairs with two of these I don't know, street toughs. I don't want to call them rebels. We don't know what they were doing yet. I'm assuming they're thieves of some sort. And just kind of tossing them around very casually. I really enjoyed seeing the SO droids at work here. So a really fun sequence. And Andor gets arrested. And now, because of his actions on Aldhani, where something that was previously a 6-month offense is now a 6-year jail sentence. And he's in big trouble as the episode ends. And again, he doesn't really even realize that it's his actions that have caused these ramifications, because he's still just thinking about himself. He's just solely focused on the here and now for himself, and he's about to pay the price for it. Now, how far do we go? Do we make it to another prison planet? Do we make it to does Vel catch up with him first, intercept him before he gets off this planet? I guess we're gonna have to find out on next week's installment, but it's a really thrilling and humorous. Let me go ahead and play that clip from between Cassian under his alias and the SO droid. Hang on, let me cue that up right now.
Wait, what is he? No, this is Chris.
Hang on to this one for me. I want to check the shelter.
He said hang.
No, you misunderstand. No, he meant watch.
Hang.
No, he means watch.
Hang.
Tell him you mean watch.
So actually a rather amusing bit right there. And I slipped up. They're not SO droids, they're KX units. I know that. I slipped. Sorry. My bad, friends. I apologize for that very, very much. But yeah, now again, Andor's going to find himself in a position where he's about to get sentenced to 6 years in a Imperial prison facility. That's not going to be good for anybody. So what is to happen next? We'll have to find out next week on episode 8 of Andor. And we'll be here to cover it that day as well, just like we have been right now. So let's go ahead. Again, I love this episode. It's really a strong episode of the show. I was worried that they might, take their foot off the gas too much on this one, but it's so compelling. It's so interesting. The characters are. I'm curious about all of them, even the ones who are the quote unquote bad guys. I'm interested in what's going on with them. I want to see how things work out, shake out for them, how they're going to connect the dots on all the different elements that are floating about out there for them to again, I want to see how Karn's going to interact with Miro, and all this ties into Cassian and Luthen and Mon Mothma, and like all this stuff. It's this wonderful tapestries coming together here, and again, we're starting to see it, the threads tighten together as these characters kind of come in closer and closer orbit of one another, and I just can't wait to see more of it. It's going to be really, really exciting stuff. So I want to thank you all so much for checking out this episode of the show. Another reminder to please follow us on social media. We're at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please be sure you're liking, subscribing, sharing, and following the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. If you'd like to support the show with some sweet 5-star reviews, we would be so grateful. They help make sure that we are not simply a cog in the machine, and we are an individual with our high up collars like Cyril Karn. No, I don't like that. I don't pop my collar. Don't do that. That's not my thing. But the 5-star reviews are nice. We truly appreciate those. If you'd like to support the show with some of your hard-earned shekels, you can do that too. You can become an official member of Buckethead Nation, a Mandovision Maniac, if you will, at patreon.com/Mandovision. You can join the Maniacs and gain access to sweet bonus content. Thank you to our current Patreons, the Aspinall Chody, the Batman Abejo, Jeff Nail. Jeff's a co-host on The Ring and Ear, a great music podcast, so check them out. Thanks to Evil Circle, the evilest of all circles, the Squid Master General, Mr. Brian Broussard, the New Jersey Devil, Mark Wegemer, our very own Joker and Harley Quinn, Brian and Krista of Pride Brewing Company in Baltimore, Maryland, the Beer Hut Brigadier General, Jesus Beer Hops, the Silent Assassin, he who shall not be named, and of course, Syndicate Ram, co-host of Come On, It's So Good, a great movie podcast that I recommend so very, very highly. All right, my friends, we're going to wrap this up. We'll be back next week for more Andor talk. Keep your bucket on. And remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
I find that answer vague and unconvincing.